The first thing Harlan Fisk noticed about the alien Marines was how tall they were. Not just tall in the way basketball players were, but unnaturally elongated like someone had grabbed a regular soldier and stretched him out with a cosmic rolling pin. Their armor gleamed a dull silver blue and hissed faintly at the joints as they moved. There were 20 of them, each standing in a perfect row outside the training yard of Coalition Station Veros 12, and every single one looked like it had never smiled in its life. Harlan approached with his duffel slung over one shoulder, boots crunching on the gravel path. The sun, one of three that bathed the station, glared down with just enough heat to make sweat bead along his spine. He stopped a few meters in front of them and let the silence hang. One of the aliens stepped forward. It had a name Harlan couldn't pronounce, so he just called him Brack. Brack was their commander, a veteran of 2 Scythian campaigns and the only alien in the group who had ever seen a human in combat. According to the briefing, that human had been a drone operator stationed light years away, so Harlan didn't count it. "You are Harlen Fisk," Brack said, his voice like someone grinding gravel through a jet engine. "Yeah," Harlan replied, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. "You the welcoming committee." Brack didn't blink. "We are here to evaluate your training protocols. Your government insists they are effective. We are skeptical." "Of course you are," Harlan muttered. Brack turned and motioned for the others to follow. "Proceed, we will observe." Harlan dropped his bag by the edge of the yard and walked to the center of the open field. The training ground was simple, a wide, flat stretch of hardened soil with a few metal rigs, pull-up bars, and a weighted sled at one end, nothing fancy. He rolled his shoulders and stretched his arms across his chest. "All right," he said aloud, not caring whether the aliens understood sarcasm. "Warm-up time." He started with jumping jacks, standard set, 50 reps. The alien Marines watched, unmoving. Then burpees, 40 of them. His breathing deepened, sweat starting to form, but his pace never faltered. By the time he dropped into push-ups, standard military set, hands flat, back straight, he caught movement from the corner of his eye. One of the aliens swayed. He glanced over. The alien's skin, normally a muted gray, had turned a sickly shade of bluish-green. It staggered back a step. "You good?" Harlan called out. The alien didn't answer. It collapsed a moment later, limbs twitching. Brack barked something in his native tongue, and 2 others rushed forward to help. Harlan stood, resting his hands on his hips. "That was the warm-up," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Another alien dropped to one knee, then another sat down heavily on the ground, wheezing through its filtration mask. Harlan blinked in disbelief. Are you guys all right? That was literally just the start." Brack stormed over, his expression unreadable. "What toxins are you emitting?" "Toxins," Harlan laughed once. "That was cardio. Our physiology is not adapted to your methods. These movements are erratic, inefficient." Harlan walked over to the nearest alien, who was lying flat on his back with limbs sprawled out. He knelt down and checked the breathing rate, then looked at the skin again. No rash, no swelling, just overexertion. "You're telling me your elite Marines can't handle jumping jacks?" Brack's jaw tightened. "Our training emphasizes precision, stillness, core strength, not chaotic motion." Harlan stood and wiped his forehead. "Then you're in for a hell of a week." The next day only 12 showed up. The rest, according to Brack, were under medical evaluation. Harlan didn't press. He brought out a pair of resistance bands and had the remaining soldiers mimic his stretches. He slowed it down, explaining the purpose of each movement, but even with the speed cut in half, 2 more bowed out before the halfway point. By the 3rd day, the station's medical bay was full. Brack, to his credit, hadn't missed a session, but even he was showing signs of strain. His gait had stiffened and his breathing had developed a faint whistle. Harlan pulled him aside after the drills. "Look," he said, tossing a towel over his shoulder. "I get it. This isn't what you're used to, but you can't just throw your guys into something and expect them to handle it without conditioning." Brack's eyes narrowed. "We are warriors. We do not need conditioning. We adapt instantly." "No one adapts instantly," Harlan replied. "Human, alien, doesn't matter. You think I could walk into your gravity chamber and start lifting whatever boulders you train with? I'd break something." Brack was silent for a moment. "2 of my soldiers suffered tendon ruptures," he said finally. "One cannot stand, another vomited blood." Harlan winced. "Yeah, okay, that's not good, but I warned you, this isn't about ego, it's physiology." The 4th day brought a change. Brack arrived alone. "Where are the others?" Harlan asked. "They are confined to recovery chambers. I have chosen to continue alone." Harlan eyed him. "You sure?" Brack nodded once. Fine, we'll start slow. They moved through the circuits carefully. Harlen demonstrated each motion, waited for Brack to mimic it, then corrected his form. The alien's movements were stiff, but he was learning. Sweat poured from his gray skin, dripping down his neck and soaking into the collar of his training suit. After 40 minutes, Brack collapsed onto the ground, chest heaving. Harlen crouched beside him. That's progress, you made it farther than yesterday. Brack stared at the sky, eyes wide. You do this daily. Twice a day on deployment, plus combat drills. Brack didn't speak for a while. By the end of the week, Brack could complete an entire warm-up without collapsing. The others returned gradually, humbled and cautious. Harlen adjusted the training to accommodate their limits but made no concessions on consistency. He watched them struggle, fail, and get back up. He saw muscles tremble under strain, alien joints pop in protest, and heard more than a few curses in languages he didn't understand. But none of them quit. On the 10th day, Harlen stood at the edge of the training yard, arms crossed, while all 20 alien Marines completed the full warm-up under the midday sun. Their movements were clumsy, their timing off, but they finished it. Brack approached, his uniform soaked through. You were correct, he said, voice hoarse. Adaptation is not instant, it requires suffering. Harlen gestured to the field. It also requires showing up every day. Brack nodded. Your methods are illogical, painful, but effective. Harlen cracked a tired grin. That's humanity in a nutshell. The alien commander looked at him, breathing ragged. Perhaps our next joint training can include our methods. Harlen groaned. Only if you promise not to drop a boulder on me. Brack almost smiled, almost. On the 16th day, the alien Marines arrived late. Harlen stood barefoot on the chalky ground, waiting beside a stack of weighted plates he'd dragged over from the station's supply shed. The air smelled faintly of ozone and overcooked starch, the scent of the station's recycled atmosphere system, which had been wheezing for 3 days under the strain of a minor malfunction no one could seem to locate. He squinted upward. 2 station drones zipped past overhead, trailing faint blue light as they returned from a perimeter sweep. Brack arrived with 13 soldiers. Their gait was slower than usual. They moved with the deliberate care of beings nursing soreness they didn't want to admit. You're short 7, Harlen said without looking at them. Brack adjusted the strap across his chest. Temporary gastrointestinal instability. They consumed raw protein supplements without dilution. Harlen dropped the plate he was holding. It landed with a heavy thud. You let them dry scoop powdered rations. They interpreted your emphasis on raw effort literally. He pinched the bridge of his nose. That's not what that means. That's not what that will ever mean. Brack folded his arms. Clarification would have been helpful. I didn't think I needed to clarify. Don't eat industrial-grade nutrition powder like candy. One of the aliens behind Brack retched into a waste bucket he'd brought with him. Harlen pointed at him. He's not training until he's cleared by sickbay. He has been cleared. Not by me. Brack gave a nod. The soldier sat down without protest, pale and sweating. Harlen picked up the plates and started stacking them onto a sled. Today's lesson, resistance, not the metaphorical kind, actual resistance. We're doing sled pushes. Brack tilted his head. To what end? Muscle endurance, stability, cardiovascular integration, and because it's awful. The aliens remained silent. Harlen gestured to the sled. This weighs 300 pounds. You'll push it from that mark to the end of the field, then back. Don't stop, don't fall over. If you start vomiting, that's your body telling you you're alive. Brack stepped forward first. He crouched, placed both hands on the sled's rail and shoved. The sled didn't move. Harlen leaned against the pull-up bar and scratched his shoulder. Brack adjusted, repositioned his legs, and shoved again. The sled inched forward, skidding across the soil with a low groan. Dust kicked up around his boots. His arms trembled slightly. By the time he reached the halfway mark, his breathing was ragged. That's halfway, Harlen called out. Don't collapse dramatically. The wind's blowing toward me and I'm not in the mood for body odor. Brack didn't answer, he kept pushing. It took him 4 minutes to finish the full lap. When he let go of the sled, he stumbled backward and sat down hard. His chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. He said nothing. Another alien stepped up, then another. The third made it only halfway before his quadriceps seized and he dropped to both knees, clutching his leg. Harlen ran over. Don't move, he said, kneeling beside him. Tell me where it's locking. The alien tapped just above his kneecap. Vastus lateralis, yeah, that'll do it. He reached into the small pack slung at his hip and pulled out a canister of cold spray. He applied it in short bursts, then massaged the area carefully with 2 fingers. You need electrolytes and more potassium than you're getting. Our rations are balanced. Not for this kind of stress. He stood and pointed at the others. Nobody else touches the sled until I've checked your hydration levels. Line up. Brack watched, still seated, as Harlen moved down the line, checking skin elasticity and eye clarity, asking each alien to hold out their arm. You're using vein visibility as a hydration metric, Brack asked. Among other things, you ever do a field triage before? I have removed plasma bolts from spinal columns while under fire. Harlen pointed at another soldier's wrist. That's not the same as knowing when someone's about to cramp themselves into paralysis. The alien's skin was tacky and his radial pulse weak. You're out, Harlen said. Sit, drink. The soldier obeyed without argument. Brack stood slowly, his legs still shaky. You speak as if you are more medic than soldier. I'm both. In the field you don't get to choose which half shows up first. One of the younger aliens, whose name Harlen hadn't learned, stepped forward. He was leaner than the others, still growing into his armor. His fingers twitched nervously at his sides. Harlen gave him a nod. You next. The alien hesitated, then approached the sled. The push began slow but steady. His footing was better than the others, and he compensated for the uneven ground by shifting his weight with each step. Sweat poured down his neck, but his pace never faltered. By the time he returned to the start line, Harlen gave a short clap. Better, you've done this before. The alien nodded once. I watched 10 hours of human strength contests. I mimicked their stance. Harlen blinked. You watched strongman competitions. They were labeled as motivational in your data archives. Brack looked at the young soldier, then back at Harlen. Why does watching others succeed make your species move? Harlen shrugged. Because if someone else can do it, we figure we're not special enough to say we can't. Brack sat back down. That is irrational. That's the point. By the afternoon, only 5 had attempted the sled more than once. Harlen spent most of the time applying cold compresses, adjusting form, and forcing water down reluctant throats. Several of the Marines had begun to wear knee supports fashioned from cut sections of ship hose. One wrapped his midsection in a pressure vest built from scavenged padding strips. You lot are either going to innovate yourselves into fitness, Harlen muttered, or die trying. Brack leaned on his knees, watching one of his soldiers attempt a second push. I have begun experiencing involuntary muscle twitches during rest cycles. That's called progress, Harlen said. I do not enjoy it. You're not supposed to. By dusk, the training yard was littered with discarded water pouches and sweat-stained wraps. A few aliens lay flat on their backs, staring at the sky in silence. Harlen sniffed. The ozone tang was worse now, more smoke than starch. He made a mental note to check the air filters again. You know, he said, walking over to Brack, I used to think your kind were bred for combat. Brack turned his head. I mean, Harlen continued, you've got the height, the armor, the whole made from stone vibe, but you're slow to adjust. You've got the hardware, but not the software. Brack exhaled slowly. We optimize for familiar conditions, controlled variables, predictable threats. Harlen pointed at the sled. That's not how humans work, we train for chaos. Brack studied the sled, then the soldiers sprawled across the field. I suspect we have misunderstood your species. Harlen nodded. Everyone does at first. Night came quickly on Veros 12. The twin moons rose, casting twin shadows across the yard. The training was over, but none of the Marines left immediately. They sat in silence, drinking slowly, heads bowed, not in shame, in exhaustion. Harlen sat down beside the sled, resting his back against it. You'll get stronger, he said, not looking at anyone in particular, but not if you keep trying to skip the ugly parts. Brack stood, stretching his back with a grunt. We will return tomorrow. Do me a favor, Harlen said, eyes closed. No more dry scooping protein. It's not a rite of passage, it's a mistake. I will inform them. He heard the group shuffle off, boots dragging slightly over the gravel. The silence left behind was heavy, but not unpleasant. Harlen opened one eye, looked at the stars, and muttered to himself. Strongman competitions, now I've seen everything. By the 24th day, the alien Marines no longer arrived in formation. They shuffled in, some limping, others wrapped in makeshift compression bands, one with what looked like a repurposed coolant hose acting as a shoulder sling. Harlen stood at the edge of the practice slope with a clipboard and a thermos of lukewarm coffee, watching them drag themselves into position like a group of hungover high schoolers on mile day. "All right," he muttered, clicking his pen. "Let's see if anyone still has cartilage." The slope wasn't steep, barely an incline, but it was long and loose underfoot. The gravel shifted unpredictably, and Harlen had personally hauled a dozen weighted packs to its base the night before. He gestured to the pile. "Load-bearing drills today. You'll take one pack, ascend the hill, descend with control, and repeat until I say stop. If you fall, I'll mark it. If you drop the pack, I'll mark it. If you cry, I'll hand you electrolytes and mark it." One of the aliens, a broad-shouldered one with a deep scar across his temple, grunted as he lifted a bag onto his back. His knees buckled slightly, but he steadied. "Is this intended to simulate combat evacuation?" he asked. "Nope," said Harlen. "This is intended to simulate the worst hike of your life while being shot at by mosquitoes the size of house cats." Another alien examined the strap of his pack, then looked up. "These are uneven weights." "Correct, because real life doesn't care how balanced your load is. Some of them are off-center. One has a sandbag with a slow leak. Figure it out." Brack adjusted his own pack and stepped onto the incline without a word. The others followed his lead, slowly ascending, their boots digging into the sliding gravel. The first 5 meters were easy. The next 10 saw 2 stumble. By the halfway point, one alien tripped on a loose rock and sprawled forward, catching himself with his forearms. Harlen didn't move. He sipped from the thermos and checked a box on his clipboard. "Don't use your hands, reset and start again." The alien groaned and dragged himself upright. His breathing was shallow but steady. By the 4th repetition, the group was visibly deteriorating. Packs sagged, form suffered. One recruit tried to edge up the slope sideways, hoping for better traction, but slipped backward and slid all the way to the bottom, kicking up a cloud of dust as he went. Harlen walked over and crouched beside him. "Where'd your balance go?" The alien rolled onto his back, blinking up at the sky. "My stabilizers are fatigued." "Yeah, that's what happens when you build all your strength on flat ground. Your glute medius is crying for help right now." "I do not know which one that is." Harlen patted his thigh. "The one that's on fire." The next round began slower. Most of them had adopted a rhythm: 1 step, pause, adjust. Brack reached the top and turned carefully, descending with exaggerated care. Behind him, the younger soldier who'd watched strongman videos was struggling. His foot skidded and he dropped to one knee. Harlen jogged up halfway and met him there. "I can't push off," the alien said, teeth clenched. "My calf has locked." Harlen knelt behind him. "Keep weight off it. I'm going to release the tension." He reached around, placed his thumbs just beneath the back of the alien's knee, and pressed into the muscle belly, massaging in small circles. The alien flinched, then exhaled sharply as the spasm began to release. "Feels like fire," he said. "Means it's working." Harlen waited until the muscle softened, then helped him stand. The weight pack was resecured, and the alien continued his climb without another word. By midday, 4 had dropped out. 2 were vomiting from exertion, one was curled near the slope with a compression band wrapped too tightly around his thigh, and another had simply laid down and refused to answer questions. Harlen sent him to the station medic with a hydration pack and strict instructions not to nap. Brack approached as the rest finished their final descent. His posture was stiff but stable. "We have improved," he said. "You've survived," Harlen corrected. "Improvement's what happens after the soreness fades and you realize you can't wear your armor the same way anymore." Brack tilted his head. "I have noticed muscle growth in previously underutilized areas. My gait has changed." "That's your hip flexors finally waking up. Congratulations, you're achieving basic human mobility." Brack's eyes narrowed. "Why does your species train this way?" Harlen uncapped his thermos. "Because we never know what kind of planet we'll land on next. Gravity changes, terrain shifts, and sometimes you have to carry your friend uphill while something with too many legs is chasing you." The alien was quiet a moment, then you assume the worst. "We plan for it, that's different." Later that evening, after the sun had dipped below the mining ridge and the station lights bathed the field in sterile white, Harlen sat cross-legged on the ground, wrapping a soldier's ankle in kinesiology tape. The alien hissed as the adhesive touched skin but didn't pull away. You've got overstretched perineals. Try not to pivot suddenly for a day or two. I thought pain indicated failure. No, pain is information, ignoring it is failure. He finished the rap and stood. The alien tested his weight, then nodded once and limped off toward the barracks. Brack emerged from the shadows, his uniform soaked through again, though he no longer looked like he might collapse. He held a data pad. We have completed a comparative analysis of injury rates among your human soldiers. The frequency is higher than ours. Harlen nodded, but the recovery time is shorter. That's the trade-off. We break, but we build back quick. Your body systems are less efficient. Sure, but we compensate with grit. Brack looked down at the data pad. We have begun implementing your principles in our own barracks: stretching, unstable load training, variable terrain exposure. Good, don't copy us, translate it for your bodies. Brack straightened. I was skeptical, but this has altered my thinking. About humans. About limits. Harlen chuckled and tossed the used tape into a waste bin. That's the thing, we don't really believe in limits, just plateaus we haven't figured out how to climb yet. The next morning, Harlen found a note clipped to the supply locker. It was written in awkward but legible standard. Sled drills complete. Without collapse, your methods endure. He read it twice, smiled once, and then clicked the lock open to start setting up for the next group. The aliens had stopped mocking the training. They'd stopped collapsing too.